Friends, what I am about to show you is not the trailer of some disaster movie. This is one of the most devastating catastrophes to hit American soil in decades. One night, one city, and within just a few hours, everything reduced to ash. This is the story of Spokane, Washington's second largest city by population, a place that a single wildfire brought to its knees overnight. Let's start from the very beginning, so you understand exactly what happened, how it happened, and what the situation on the ground looks like right now. It was a hot, dry evening in August. Washington State, located in the northwestern United States and famous for its green hills, lakes, and pine forests, was in the grip of a severe drought that year. There had been no sign of rain, and the winter snowpack, which normally replenishes the region's water supply, had been far below normal. The ground had dried out and cracked. In conditions like these, a single spark is enough to set off complete devastation. And that is exactly what happened. On a Saturday afternoon near the city of Spokane, in the West Plains area close to Airway Heights, a fire ignited that would later be named the Old Trails Fire. At first, it looked like just another ordinary brush fire, the kind that flares up somewhere or another every summer. But nature had decided to show its most terrifying face this time. Strong winds gave this fire wings. A blaze that just hours earlier had been confined to bushes and grass suddenly climbed to the very tops of the trees before anyone could react. Fire experts call this crowning, when flames rise from the ground and spread through the treetops instead of staying low. This condition allows a fire to spread many times faster, and ground crews become almost powerless to contain it. This is exactly why a fire that was just a minor news item at noon had, by evening, reached the residential neighborhoods on the northwest side of Spokane. Around the same time, two more fires broke out, the Autumn Lane Fire and the Fairview Fire. The proximity of these three fires to one another, their speed of spread, and the dangerous wind conditions forced emergency management officials to designate all three as a single, coordinated incident, which was named the Spokane Complex Fire. This decision was necessary so that all available resources, fire trucks, helicopters, and ground crews, could be deployed under one coordinated strategy. Now imagine, you're sitting at home, the TV is on, the kids are doing their homework, and suddenly the sky outside your window starts to change color. A thick, dark cloud of smoke rolls across the sky, and notifications start popping up on your security camera app. Fire alert near your location. This is exactly what happened to Angela and Wade Detheridge, who left their home with their son around 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. They had so little time that they could only grab a few bins of old family photos and some heirloom rings. Everything else, furniture, clothes, and other cherished belongings, had to be left behind. Just minutes later, their security camera started sending them fire alerts. When Wade later drove back toward their neighborhood using back roads, what he saw was a sight that would shatter anyone's heart. Entire neighborhoods had turned into piles of ash. Where houses had stood just the day before, only burnt chimneys remained standing like markers in a graveyard. Cars had melted, garages had turned to ash, the trees that once shaded these homes had become blackened, twisted skeletons. This is not just the story of one house, it's the story of hundreds of homes claimed by this fire. Spokane County, Fire District 3. Fire Chief Cody Rohrbach reported that the Old Trails Fire alone destroyed 640 structures. This number includes not just homes, but businesses, shops, and other buildings as well. When you look at the combined impact of all three fires, Old Trails, Autumn Lane, and Fairview, officials estimated that roughly 700 structures had been destroyed, and that number was climbing with every passing hour because the fire was still at 0% containment. What does 0% contained actually mean? It means that even though thousands of firefighters were working around the clock, not a single section of the fire had been fully brought under control. Flames were spreading in every direction, and the weather was working against them too. Strong winds, dry conditions, and falling humidity levels were all combining to make the fire even more dangerous. Now let's talk about the people who bore the brunt of this disaster, the residents of Spokane. Mayor Lisa Brown, who was leading the city through this crisis, called it the worst natural disaster her city had ever faced. She told reporters that nearly half of the city's neighborhoods had either been evacuated or were under threat. Evacuation orders were issued for somewhere between 65,000 and 67,000 people. Just think about that. This is a city with a total population of around 230,000, and more than a third of its residents were forced to flee their homes. This is being counted among the largest wildfire evacuations in American history. People were loading only the essentials into their cars. Medications, important documents, their children's belongings, and if they had time, a few cherished photographs. This evacuation didn't just involve ordinary residents. It included hospital patients too. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Hospital had to be evacuated, a facility that was treating veterans who had served their country. Just think about it. Men and women who once fought on battlefields were now being wheeled out on stretchers to escape a fire in their own city. It's a scene that would move anyone. Now, let me tell you about the cause of this fire, which is perhaps the most infuriating part of this story. Initially, investigators had no idea how the fire had actually started. Was it natural causes, like a lightning strike, or was it human negligence, or even a crime? For several days, this question remained unanswered. But on Monday night, the Spokane County Sheriff's Office took a major step. They arrested a 37-year-old man named Aaron Farinacci, who was implicated in the investigation into the Old Trails fire, the most destructive of the three blazes. He was arrested at his own home without incident and charged with first-degree arson. Just think about it. If this turns out to be true, it means that the devastation we're witnessing right now, thousands of homes, businesses, memories, and an entire city's way of life, is not the result of some natural disaster, but the result of one person's crime. This news sparked anger and grief across the country. People are asking how anyone could have such a callous heart as to deliberately cause this kind of devastation. Around the same time, another troubling issue came to light: the illegal use of drones. Fire officials reported that on Sunday, while firefighters were using helicopters and aircraft to try to bring the fire under control, at least 26 unauthorized drones were spotted flying in their operational area. These are called drone incursions. Whenever a drone is in the air where aerial firefighting is taking place, pilots are forced to halt their flights because of the risk of collision. 2 drone operators were cited in connection with this. Authorities repeatedly urged the public not to fly their personal drones anywhere near these burning areas because a single moment of carelessness could cost several lives. Now let's talk about the bigger picture, of which this Spokane fire is just one part. At this very moment, across the entire western United States, 17 separate wildfires were burning simultaneously in Washington state alone. This isn't just one city's problem, it's a crisis for the entire state. Given the severity of the situation, Governor Bob Ferguson declared a statewide emergency, under which most outdoor burning and agricultural burning was prohibited. Governor Ferguson personally reached out to the White House. He spoke by phone with U.S. President Donald Trump and briefed him on the situation in Spokane. Ferguson later told reporters that the president expressed sympathy for what the people of Washington were going through. He also spoke twice with Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen. According to Ferguson, both leaders showed full attention and graciousness in their response. Around the same time, Washington state's entire congressional delegation, all of the state's senators and representatives, jointly wrote a letter to President Trump, urgently requesting an expedited federal emergency declaration. They wrote that hundreds of people had completely lost their homes and farms, and that many were still barred from returning to their neighborhoods because crews were still working to extinguish smoldering embers. A federal emergency declaration means that the U.S. federal government can immediately begin sending assistance, resources, and financial aid, which could be a genuinely life-changing step for the victims. Now, let's talk about the scale of the damage that has come to light so far. Initially, it was reported that the fire had scorched roughly 7,700 acres of land. But as time went on, that number kept climbing. And according to reports, the burned area eventually reached 5 square miles, or roughly 32 square kilometers. Just imagine, that's an area equivalent to several small towns. This wasn't just a forest burning, an entire urban and suburban area was engulfed in flames. And this wasn't limited to Spokane alone. Reports indicated that across the entire state of Washington, more than 390 square miles, or over 1,000 square kilometers, had burned so far. This figure is proof that Washington state is going through a period of severe drought and reduced snowpack, something widely seen as a direct consequence of the changing climate. Mayor Lisa Brown pointed to this very issue in her statement. She said that the people of her city had known for years about the dangers posed by a changing climate and had been working to reduce that risk. But the situation this time was unprecedented and unlike anything seen before. Meteorologists said there was some hope of relief by Monday. Forecasts called for lighter winds and cooler temperatures, which officials hoped would help firefighters gain some ground. But there was no rain in the forecast, and experts warned that this relief would only last a few days, since hot, dry conditions were expected to return again by midweek. Courtney James, a spokesperson for the Washington State Department of Natural Resources, said the situation remained extremely fragile, with the fire still at 0% containment. She emphasized that even though the weather was improving slightly, firefighters still had a very long battle ahead of them. U.S. Senator Maria Cantwell, who represents Washington state, also issued a stark warning at a news conference. She said that they were not out of danger yet, and that the coming days could prove very difficult. Her words point to the fact that, even though some media coverage may have suggested a bit of relief, the situation on the ground was still extremely dangerous. Now let's think for a moment about the lives of the people whose homes were completely destroyed. Hundreds of families like Angela and Wade Deathridge are still waiting to find out when they'll be allowed back into their neighborhoods. Mayor Lisa Brown herself said it was hard to say when people would be able to return. It could be a week, or it could take even longer. This isn't just about the loss of houses. When someone loses their home, they're not just losing four walls. They're losing an entire lifetime of memories, childhood photographs, things they worked hard to build, all in a single night. For those who didn't have insurance, this disaster could prove even more devastating, because they have no financial safety net to help them start over. It was also reported that many people lost their family businesses, farms and livestock as well. The congressional delegation's letter specifically mentioned farms, which points to the fact that this isn't just an urban crisis. It's also a crisis for the people who made their living off the agricultural land surrounding the city. When farms and livestock are wiped out, people's livelihoods are wiped out with them, and that impact is felt for months and years to come. So far, thankfully, there have been no confirmed reports of deaths or serious injuries. That is a real blessing, because given how fast this fire spread and how many people had to evacuate, the risk of loss of life was extremely high. But officials have repeatedly warned that this number could change, since many areas still haven't been fully assessed and many homes are still smoldering or remain in dangerous condition. Now let me give you a bigger picture of this entire situation, so you understand why this isn't just a Spokane problem. Across the entire western United States, dozens of wildfires are burning at the same time. California, Oregon, and Washington all face wildfire season every summer, but experts say that in recent years, this season has been starting earlier, burning more intensely, and lasting longer. The reason isn't just drought, it's also reduced snowfall. The amount of snow that falls on the mountains during winter is what feeds rivers and land throughout the summer. But when there's less snowfall to begin with, the ground is already dry, and the summer heat dries it out even further. This dried out grass, trees, and brush essentially become ready-made fuel for fire. All it takes is a single spark, whether from lightning or from human negligence or crime, to set off complete devastation. It's also worth noting that firefighting operations didn't just involve local Washington state firefighters. Crews from other states began arriving to help as well. Federal and state agencies came together to form a coordinated incident management team known as California Interagency Incident Management Team 7. This team specializes in handling exactly this kind of large, complex wildfire incident, and its presence is proof of just how seriously the Spokane complex fire was being treated. Let me also tell you a bit about how firefighters operate in a situation this severe. Ground crews first try to secure the areas where people live in order to save lives. At the same time, helicopters and aircraft drop water and specialized fire retardant chemicals to try to slow the fire's advance. But when winds are as strong as they were on that Sunday, flying helicopters and aircraft becomes dangerous too, and operations can be forced to a halt. This is exactly why controlling a fire becomes even harder during periods of strong wind. Another important detail that emerged is that the fire didn't spread in a straight line. It jumped roads and even crossed rivers. Normally, roads and bodies of water act as natural barriers against fire, but the intensity of this blaze and the strength of the wind were so extreme that these barriers proved useless. The fire swept through Riverside State Park before turning toward the residential neighborhoods on Spokane's northwest side, causing devastation there. The Old Trails Fire and the Autumn Lane Fire each burned more than 3,000 acres, while the Fairview Fire was severe in its own right. Together, these three fires caused a level of destruction that emergency officials have called one of the most devastating wildfires in Washington state's history. Now think about the effort being put in by the firefighters who are working day and night in smoke-filled air, in extreme heat, and under dangerous conditions. These people are risking their own lives to save the lives and homes of others. Many of these firefighters are local residents themselves, meaning they're working around the clock to save their own neighbors' homes, even while their own families may be sitting in evacuation zones. Local hospitals and emergency shelters also faced an enormous burden. When thousands of people flee their homes, they need somewhere to take shelter. Community centers, schools, and churches were converted into emergency shelters where evacuees were provided with food, water, and a place to stay. Organizations like the Red Cross also sprang into action to help those affected. This disaster has also raised another important question. Is even a developed country like the United States truly prepared for these increasingly severe natural disasters? Every year, wildfire season seems to grow more intense, and it's placing greater and greater strain on emergency response agencies. Experts say that if the changing climate isn't taken seriously, disasters like this one could become far more common in the years ahead. Governor Bob Ferguson addressed this issue as well. He said that the people of Washington state have known about these risks for years and have been trying to prepare themselves, but nature's fury has once again proven far more powerful than any human preparation. Let me also tell you the stories of people who still haven't been able to return to their homes. Many people are currently staying with relatives or friends, or spending their time in emergency shelters. This has been especially hard on children, who not only had to leave their homes, but also had their schools shut down, completely upending their everyday lives. Many people, once they were allowed back into their neighborhoods, found nothing where their homes used to stand except ash and burnt walls. Several residents said they could barely recognize their own homes because everything had been destroyed so completely that no landmark remained. One person said that all that was left where their house used to be was a single burnt chimney, which had once been part of their living room. This isn't just material loss. When people lose their homes, they lose their identity, their memories, and a vital part of their lives. For many, these houses weren't just buildings. They were symbols of their parents, their grandparents, homes that had been passed down through generations within their families. Now, let's talk about the road ahead for the people of Spokane. Recovery, the process of rebuilding, often continues for years. It's not just about rebuilding houses. People also have to rebuild their entire lives, buying new belongings from scratch, replacing lost documents, and most importantly, coping with the fear and grief that comes with a disaster like this. Once a federal emergency declaration is approved, victims can receive financial assistance, temporary housing, and other support from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. This process is often slow, and many people end up waiting months for help to arrive, but it's still a ray of hope for those who have lost everything. In her final statement, Mayor Lisa Brown made an important point. She said that the geographic and political boundaries that divide us are in reality invisible, because when a disaster like this strikes, an entire city, an entire state, and indeed an entire country come together to help one another. Perhaps that spirit of unity is one bright spot amid this devastation. One thing that makes this whole situation even more concerning is that Spokane is not the only city facing a crisis like this. Every year, thousands of people across other American cities and towns are forced to flee their homes because of wildfires. This number seems to be growing year after year, and it's putting increasing pressure on emergency response agencies. When dozens of major fires are burning across the entire country at the same time, resources, whether that's firefighters, helicopters, or financial aid, all come under strain simultaneously. That's exactly why Spokane had to request help from other states, because Washington alone didn't have enough resources to handle all three major fires at once. Consider, too, the impact this disaster will have on insurance companies and financial institutions. When thousands of homes are destroyed all at once, the volume of insurance claims becomes so overwhelming that companies can't process every claim immediately. Many families end up waiting months for a decision on their claim, all while having no permanent place to live. For those who didn't have wildfire insurance, which is often expensive and unaffordable for many people, this loss becomes even more devastating because they have no financial means to rebuild. Local businesses were also hit hard by this disaster. Small shops, restaurants, and family-run businesses built up over years of hard work were reduced to ashes overnight. When a business is destroyed, it's not just the owner who suffers a loss. The jobs of everyone who worked there disappear too. In this way, the impact of this fire isn't limited to the people whose homes burned. It extends across the entire local economy. Environmentalists and scientists are calling this entire situation a major warning sign. They say that if we don't start taking the changing climate, drought, and forest management seriously right now, disasters like the one in Spokane will become even more common in the future. Some experts argue that cities need to be more cautious about building in areas with high wildfire risk, and that building codes should be updated so homes are more fire resistant, for example, by using fire-resistant construction materials and regularly clearing dry grass and brush around homes. On the other hand, some people are also questioning whether emergency warning systems can be improved. When a fire spreads as fast as this one did, with the Old Trails fire engulfing an entire neighborhood between noon and evening, people are left with very little time to evacuate. Many families said they had only a few minutes to leave their homes. If warning systems could send alerts even faster, perhaps more people could have saved a few more of their belongings, or left with better preparation. It's also worth noting the role that media and social media played in spreading news of this disaster around the world. People were filming videos on their phones showing buildings on fire, billowing clouds of smoke, and terrified residents fleeing. These videos helped make people across the globe aware of just how severe this disaster was, and many responded immediately by offering help. Some people are also asking whether governments and agencies can better prepare for disasters like this in the future. After every wildfire season, serious conversations take place about this, but experts say that preparation alone isn't enough. The real issue lies in the underlying causes that are making these fires more severe with every passing year. Until those root causes are addressed, we may keep hearing news just as devastating, or even worse, year after year. In closing, I want to remind you that whenever you watch, hear, or read news like this, take a moment to think about the people who are right now trying to rebuild their lives from scratch. Losing everything in a single night, your home, your memories, your sense of safety, is not an easy experience. The people of Spokane are fighting a long and difficult battle right now, and they need our prayers and our compassion. This story isn't just about one city. It's a reminder of just how powerless human beings can be in the face of nature, and also a reminder that when people stand together, even after the worst devastation, rebuilding is possible. Spokane will rise from its ashes again, just as cities always rise after hard times. But this journey will take time, it will take hard work, and above all, it will take resilience. If you'd like to help the people of Spokane, you can contribute through local relief organizations, such as the Red Cross or local community relief funds. Every bit of help, whether financial or simply in the form of prayers, means a great deal to those affected. Let's also take a moment to talk about the physical toll this disaster has taken on the people who stayed behind or returned too soon. Smoke inhalation has become a serious health concern across the entire region, not just for the residents who lived closest to the fire lines. Air quality readings in and around Spokane reportedly climbed into hazardous levels for days, with thick haze blanketing the skyline and reducing visibility for miles. Doctors and public health officials urged residents, especially children, the elderly, and anyone with respiratory conditions like asthma, to stay indoors as much as possible and to avoid any strenuous outdoor activity. For a city already dealing with the trauma of evacuation and loss, this added public health emergency made an already difficult situation even harder to bear. Pharmacies reported a surge in demand for inhalers and air purifiers, and local health clinics saw a noticeable increase in patients coming in with breathing difficulties and irritated eyes. There's also the emotional and psychological dimension of this disaster that often doesn't get enough attention in the headlines. Losing a home isn't just a financial or logistical setback. It's a deeply traumatic experience. Mental health professionals who work with disaster survivors often point out that the stress of evacuation, the uncertainty of not knowing whether your home still exists, and the grief of returning to nothing can trigger symptoms similar to those seen after other major traumatic events. Children in particular can struggle to process this kind of sudden upheaval, especially when their schools are closed and their entire routine is disrupted overnight. Community organizations and school counselors in the Spokane area have already begun setting up support services to help both children and adults process what they've been through, recognizing that the emotional recovery from a disaster like this can take just as long, if not longer, than the physical rebuilding. It's worth pausing here to reflect on how quickly modern technology allowed this disaster to unfold in real time for the rest of the world. Within hours of the first flames appearing near Airway Heights, footage was already circulating online. Dashcam videos of orange skies, doorbell camera clips catching the exact moment flames appeared over a fence line, and drone footage, ironically captured by authorized news outlets, showing entire blocks reduced to smoking rubble from above. This kind of real-time documentation is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it helps emergency responders and the public understand the scale of a disaster almost instantly, and it can mobilize donations and volunteer support within hours rather than days. On the other hand, it also means that families are sometimes learning the fate of their own homes not from an official source, but from a stranger's video posted online, which can be an incredibly painful way to receive that kind of news. Local schools, already strained by the disruption, had to make difficult decisions about whether to delay the start of the academic year or shift to remote learning for students whose neighborhoods remained under evacuation orders. For families who had just lost their homes, the added stress of figuring out school enrollment, replacing lost school supplies, and simply finding a stable place for their children to sleep each night piled on top of an already overwhelming set of challenges. Teachers and school administrators across the district stepped up in many cases, opening their own doors to displaced families and organizing supply drives for students who had lost everything, including their backpacks, books, and basic school essentials. Local businesses that survived the fire also found themselves playing an unexpected role in the recovery effort. Grocery stores, hardware shops, and gas stations became critical hubs, not just for supplies, but for information, as residents gathered to share updates on which roads were open, which shelters had space, and which neighborhoods had been given the green light to return. In moments like these, ordinary businesses often become informal community centers, holding a fractured city together even as official channels struggle to keep pace with a fast-changing situation. As the days go on, attention will likely shift from the immediate crisis of active flames to the much longer and more complicated process of rebuilding. Debris removal alone, in a disaster of this scale, can take months, since destroyed structures often contain hazardous materials like asbestos, melted electronics, and chemical residue that require specialized crews to clear safely before any new construction can even begin. Insurance adjusters, contractors, and government inspectors will need to work through hundreds, if not thousands, of individual properties, one at a time, verifying damage, approving claims, and issuing permits. For many families, this bureaucratic process can feel almost as exhausting as the fire itself, dragging on for months while they continue living out of suitcases, hotel rooms, or the spare bedrooms of relatives. There is also the question of how a city rebuilds its sense of normalcy after an event like this. Neighborhoods aren't just collections of houses. They're networks of relationships, familiar routines, favorite coffee shops, and school pickup lines. When an entire neighborhood is erased overnight, it's not just the physical structures that vanish. The social fabric that held that community together is disrupted too. Some families who lost everything may choose not to rebuild in the same location at all, opting instead to relocate elsewhere, which can permanently reshape the character of the neighborhoods that once stood there. Others will be determined to rebuild exactly where they stood before, driven by a deep attachment to the land and the life they built there, regardless of how long or difficult that process turns out to be. Despite everything, there have already been countless stories of ordinary people stepping up for their neighbors in remarkable ways. Volunteers have been showing up with truckloads of donated clothing, food, and water. Local restaurants have been cooking free meals for firefighters and displaced families alike. Complete strangers have opened up spare rooms to families they had never met before the fire. These acts of kindness don't undo the loss, but they do offer a glimpse of the resilience and generosity that so often emerges in the aftermath of tragedy, reminding everyone involved that even in the darkest moments, communities have a remarkable capacity to hold each other up. That was the complete story of the devastating fire in Spokane, how a single spark engulfed an entire city, how more than 65,000 people were forced to leave their homes overnight, how more than 640 buildings turned to ash in a single night, and how a city is now facing its greatest test. If you found this video informative, please share it with your friends and family so that more people can understand the seriousness of this disaster and extend a helping hand to those affected. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll keep you updated with the latest information on this story.